maybe doing some of that pre-teaching, so that way they know what the expectations are right off the bat. So we'll spend the remainder of this session, as well as the upcoming sessions, focusing more on behavior management skills and techniques that you guys can use as therapeutic foster parents in managing difficult behaviors and increasing positive behaviors. So I think I skipped some of that. PowerPoint, sorry guys. So Tracy is going to go ahead and pick up with the social learning theory.
Okay, so piggybacking on what she's just talked about, we want to start thinking about what we're seeing as far as behaviors are concerned. And a behavior just doesn't fall out of the sky, okay? There's always, when we consider behavior, we have to consider A, B, C. There's an antecedent, so the thing that happens before the behavior. There's the behavior, that's that thing that we actually see, you know, what we can observe with our eyes, hear with our ears, kind of thing, okay? And then we have the consequence. And remember, consequences and behaviors can be both positive and negative, okay? So we can apply this to things that happen that are good, and we can also apply this to things that happen that are negative, okay? So let's think about this social learning theory and how it affects the behaviors. So what happens right before the child's behavior? Okay, so this is where you're going to observe or think back to what happened right before that meltdown. Okay, and we want to think about what happens right before has a lot to do with what we're going to see. They've given an example of they were picked on by peers at school that day. Okay, so that was what was happening. And what behavior was a result of that was they came home and was aggressive towards their sibling. Okay, as like getting it out. Okay, understanding what happens right before the behavior also tells you a lot about how to best address the behavior. So we have the antecedent, what happens before, then we go into the behavior. It's simply the observable action that takes place. It might be slamming a door, it might be hugging your mom, it might be taking out the trash, it might be kissing the dog, and all of these things are behaviors, both positive and negative, okay? The consequences involve what happens after the behavior and are usually the result of the behavior. So let's use this example. Children often pay close attention to how their caregivers react to the behavior. They're logging all of this information all the time. If the caregiver expresses pleasure or provides a reward, then the child's likely going to want to repeat that behavior. However, if the caregiver gets angry or scolds the child is put on punishment, however you want to word that, the child is less likely to do it again. So these reactions are the consequence of the behavior and impact the child's likelihood of performing that behavior again. So let's note, like I said before, the word consequence, when we use it here, usually people think of consequence as something negative. But I want you all to think that consequence is just the result of the antecedent and the behavior and then the consequence, okay? So it can be both positive and negative. A consequence simply is what happens as a result of the behavior. So understanding what happens right before and right after the behavior gives you considerable insight into how to best develop a plan to address those behaviors. It will make your plan more likely to succeed. Indeed, the best formulated plans are those that are based on awareness of the context surrounding that behavior and an understanding of the specifics of the behavior and consider what might be going on under the surface. What are those underlying things that are going on? Often we only want to focus our ability on changing the poor behavior, okay? But we also need to stop and think about, we want to also increase good behaviors. So we need to put just as much effort into thinking about the positive things as we do the negative. we also sometimes want to focus on what our ability might be to manipulate the consequence of a behavior. So even sometimes when there might be something negative going on, if we can turn it around and put a positive spin on it and let them see that, you know, they can have positive things if they choose to do positive things, that might also be a way to change those negative behaviors. Sometimes we can also have a large role in changing the antecedent. If we see things happening often, sometimes we can make some changes by doing a lot of pre-teaching, changing environments, all of those types of things that we can do to change that antecedent. You know, if a kid gets to school in the morning and has a negative experience because their hair wasn't done just the way they wanted it, okay? So they're going to have a bad day all day because their hair wasn't in a ponytail the way they wanted it. Well, we can change that antecedent the next day, right? We can help them get that hair the way they want it. So maybe they can have a better day. And that was a really simple, crazy thing that I just thought about. But do you see what I'm saying? I mean, we can sometimes change the antecedent altogether, which will turn it into a positive situation. So through scheduling, distraction, engagement, and positive activities, or even giving some warnings ahead of time, we can change sometimes those difficult situations and turn them into a positive thing. Oh, okay. So antecedent, horrible day at work. And then they'll probably do the consequence, right?
No, it doesn't.
Oh, what would be a behavior for a horrible day at work? What might you say?
Grumpy.
You're grumpy when you come home, right?
Tired and stressed.
Tired, stressed, grumpy.
Aggression.
You're what?
Aggression.
Aggression. Okay, you're having
That would be a behavior though.
Courtney's aggressive.
So those are feelings, right? Those in a sense are feelings. So you might see that displayed in what? Aggression.
Right.
You might slam the door.
Right.
You might yell at
So-
somebody.
Right, so, yeah, exactly. So those are the behaviors, all right? And what does grumpy look like usually?
Just kind of like,
Being short, yeah,
don't
like,
talk to me.
yeah, don't talk to
Leave me
me,
alone.
yeah, slapping, slinging, yeah, okay.
We're going for dinner. Just eat cereal. Leave me alone.
So what would a consequence be for this horrible day at work and all this grumpy behavior?
You know, lost time with her family or, you know, positive time.
Early bed.
Early bed, okay. Or maybe an argument might ensue
Yeah,
That's
between
true.
the parents or
Yeah.
something, right? Okay. All right, and then they wanted you to think about the behavior first. So they're completing their homework all by themselves. Okay, so that's the behavior, and that's a positive behavior, right?
Right.
So what could be an antecedent that led up to them completing their homework all by themselves?
They did it at daycare first.
They did it at daycare.
Yeah,
That could be, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have that great environment at daycare where they get help.
They were being
and
independent and did it.
Yeah.
That's positive.
But you also could look at this behavior as negative
Yeah.
Yeah,
because maybe
someone-
somebody wasn't willing to help
They
them
wanted to be left alone.
do their homework.
Okay.
I wish my kids.
We're gonna call it a positive thing. And so the antecedent that they got it done at daycare was another antecedent.
They, you know, you had been addressing independence and,
Or they want more
Yeah.
family time, so they'll do it ahead.
yeah.
Okay.
Or they finished it at school so they can hang out with their friends after.
Okay. Okay.
My son does his on the bus, which could be, you would think would be a good thing, but.
Okay, and then so the consequence for completing the homework alone. So let's keep it positive because I know that there's a negative spin on that. So a positive thing about and the antecedent was that you had told them that if they got their homework done, that they could spend time with their friends
Yeah.
before dark. Okay, so what would the positive consequence be?
Spending time with their friends.
Right, they would get that reward, right? Okay, let's say it's a negative and they complete their homework on alone. on the school bus and it's halfway done or whatever. And the antecedent was that the same, I mean, they still wanted that time with their friends, right?
Consequences, they got a bad grade.
Okay, but they got a bad grade. So the consequence was that they got to spend time with a friend, but as a result, their grades suffered.
Or they have
right?
to redo the whole thing.
Or they had to redo the whole thing because it was a
Yeah.
mess or whatever. Okay, so so that's going to lead us into really tracking the behavior. Okay, so we're going to have to really consider A, B, C, or A at this point because that's where we're tracking. Tracking is all about A. Okay, the antecedent. All right, and that's going to be your.
So tracking behavior. Tracking is a method of monitoring a person's behavior to help identify areas of strength and areas of concern by utilizing some components of the social learning theory. So basically looking at the ABCs that we just talked about. So it's a way to observe behavior and learn the information necessary to fix the problem. So basically it's a way for you guys to look at that or figure out what that antecedent is. So then that way we can change that behavior, and then the consequence will be a positive consequence versus a negative consequence. Tracking is not intended to be a punishment, and it's not meant to serve as a way to spy on your children. So those are just the disclaimers with that. It's not a means for you to spy, and it's not a means for you to punish children. It's just a way to track behavior and track either a positive behavior or a negative. You can track either behavior if you would like. Typically, you're going to probably track a negative behavior, so then that way you can make some positive changes, right? So, some things that we need to look at when we look at behavior. They have to be observable. So like you guys had said in the last one, like grumpy. What does that look like? So it has to be something that you can observe and you need to be able to see and or hear it, okay? You want to determine a problematic behavior and you want to determine the opposite. So say if a problematic behavior is that a child throws his backpack on the floor when he walks in, throws his shoes in the middle of the floor. That might be a problematic behavior for you guys. So the opposite of that would be hanging their backpack up and putting their shoes in the proper place, right? So you want to observe, when you're observing a behavior, you want to notice the frequency, the duration, the intensity, and the setting. So the frequency, of course, would be how often does this behavior occur? Is this really a problematic behavior? Have I only seen it one time, or am I seeing it every single day during the week? Whatever the case may be, that would be the frequency. Duration would be how long does the behavior last? Does it last for 5 minutes or does it last for 30 minutes? Does it continue throughout the night until bedtime and then in the morning they seem to be fine? So you want to kind of look at that as far as the duration. Intensity, of course, you're probably going to notice how intense it is based off of how they're behaving. So some examples is stealing change from an ashtray and I don't know many cars that have ashtrays, but this is the example. Stealing change from the ashtray in a car.
Center console.
Versus stealing jewelry or stealing from stores. So that definitely, one is not as severe. Stealing from a store, stealing jewelry is a little bit more intense.
Still stealing, just
yeah.
the intensity.
Yeah, exactly. And then setting, where does it occur? Is it happening when they come home off the school bus, when they walk in the house? Is it happening at school, or is it happening both at school and at home? So you want to probably do a little bit of digging too to find out if it's just happening at home or if it's happening in other settings as well. Okay? So tracking behavior, how do we do it? We're going to pick and define the problem behavior, and I believe that there actually is a tracking, is it on page 7? So you can kind of look at that. And then if you go to page 8, it does have the tracking behavior form, so you can kind of look at that as well. But you want to pick and define the problem. Example would be does not clean up his room. And you kind of want to have it be more on a behavior and not an attribute or a feeling. So instead of saying stop being a slob, you would want to put does not clean up his room. So you get how that's not basically calling names or giving him a negative attribute. You want to define the opposite positive behavior. So the opposite positive behavior of does not clean up his room would be cleans up his room. So very simple, but you still want to identify and define that opposite positive behavior. And you want to pick a time to observe. So you want to set aside about an hour each day. It may not be as long of a time if you can really pinpoint when you're seeing that that negative behavior, but you want to set aside the time, at least three different days to monitor that child's behavior. So if you're noticing a lot of problems when they get home from school, you may want to be able to set aside some time. Of course, if your kids go to daycare and you're seeing that problem once they get home, or if it's right before bedtime, you want to set aside that particular time. So that may mean that you have to tweak your schedule a little bit where one of you can observe that behavior or be monitoring. And that doesn't mean like follow them around, right behind them, and write down on the piece of paper.
The clipboard and everything.
Nonchalantly do it, and just kind of observe what you're seeing. And you want to track it. So you want to monitor the youth's behavior during this time and see how many times the problem behavior occurs. You want to track the times when the opposite good behavior takes place. So if they're doing that positive opposite behavior, you want to observe when that's happening as well. And you want to pay attention to what happens before and after the behavior. So again, if it's happening right after they get out of daycare, is there something happening before that in daycare? Do we need to talk to the daycare workers to see what's going on right before I pick them up? Or you noticing a child maybe picking on them, whatever the case may be. So the idea of tracking the behavior is to gain some information about the specifics of a given behavior and to learn about the context of the behavior. So the big thing in this is trying to figure out that antecedent, because once you can figure out what's happening before you see the behavior, you're probably going to be able to understand why you're seeing that behavior. And then of course what happens afterwards. If you guys are responding in a positive manner, or you're not doing a lot of yelling or belittling of the child, you may see a change in the behavior. And I'm not saying that you guys do that, but it's very just important to see what that consequence is or how you respond afterwards, and can we as parents tweak that so that maybe we could change the behavior as well. Okay, I think that is it. So we're going to do an activity about tracking behavior. And that's
Okay. So turn to your tracking behavior in your manual. So this is designed to assist you all in tracking a specific behavior. This form walks you through the steps for tracking the behavior, to include identifying the behavior, recording the incidents of the problem and positive behaviors, and then describe the events that occurred just before and right after. Do we have that vignette? Okay, we're going to look at a vignette.
oh, sorry.
That's
I
okay.
just wanted to make sure.
It's chapter 3, tracking from off-road parenting, and we're going to watch that real quick. I want you all to use this form, okay, to think about what you're seeing on the vignette, okay, and practice tracking. We're going to
page 8, I'm sorry.
page 8. It's
Okay.
like a little, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
So we'll watch this. I want y'all to be thinking about what you're seeing. We're going to give you about a minute once it's over with, and then we'll look at what was different. Okay. All right.
Can you guys see that okay?
I'm always impressed with how much we know about what's going on with our children. but sometimes we're just too close to a problem to see it clearly. What can you do when this happens? Well, take stock of the situation first, and then find out what the facts are. Here's an easy way to get a clearer picture. It's called tracking.
Hello? Yes, this is Estelle Bradley. Hi, Jan. Yes, I remember you. How are you? Yes, I can meet with you. May I ask why? 3 o'clock is fine. Okay, bye. Jan.
Oh, hi, Mrs. Bradley. Come on in.
Hi, how you doing?
Pretty good. I'm sorry to have to call you down here, Mrs. Bradley, but I'm concerned about Trevor, and I wanted to talk to you in person.
Well, I'm glad you did.
As I told you on the phone today, Trevor got into another fight, and that's the third one this week.
I didn't know anything about the first two.
I thought as much. Do you have any idea why Trevor might be having such a hard time?
No, I can't figure that boy out.
Well, let's start with his behavior after school.
To tell you the truth, my house is a madhouse after they all come home from school.
Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure, but I think Trevor starts a lot of stuff with his brother and sister.
Well, what makes you think he's the root of the conflict?
He's always hitting someone, or yelling, cussing at them.
Well, how many times does he fight or yell within that hour after they all get home from school?
I don't know, all the time. To be perfectly honest, I don't even care. All I know is I want it to stop.
Well, how many times does he just get along with his siblings at home?
Now, how am I supposed to know that?
Mrs. Brantley, I'm not just trying to ask you a lot of impossible questions. The answers to these kinds of things will help us to figure out how to make things better for Trevor.
How's that?
If you do know how often Trevor yells or fights, you can begin to see what leads up to it. And if you can understand what causes it, you may be able to do something about it.
You may have a point there.
You see, I'm not just looking at the problem. I also want you to understand how important it is to encourage Trevor when he's not acting out as well.
Well, anything that will help, I'm willing to try. How do we start?
Well, pick a problem you want to work on and write it down. Try something simpler.
Hi, honey.
Hey, kids asleep?
Thankfully.
What's wrong, honey?
I'm just worried about Trevor. I had to meet with the school counselor today.
What happened?
He's acting out in school, just like he does here.
Enough is enough. We need to put our foot down. That boy just can't go around fighting all the time.
Frank Wade.
Why? So I can come home to you being upset every night? Not anymore. I should have put my foot down a long time ago. Showed that boy was boss.
Frank, try and calm down.
What should we do? What do you think we should do?
Well, I met with the counselor, and we came up with a way to get to the root of the problem. She said that if I write down what he's actually doing, then we can see what's really going on.
I don't need a counselor to tell me how to deal with my son.
Well, I do. And if you swallow your pride for a few minutes and let me explain what she suggested, then you can see that it'll make good sense too.
I'm listening.
So, if the world were perfect,
Which it's not.
if it were, he wouldn't be hitting or arguing with anyone. Instead, he'd be getting along with them. So what I'm going to do is track his behavior on this sheet of paper for an hour after they come home from school. I'm going to write down when he's acting out in the problem behavior column, and when he's getting along, I'm going to put a mark in the positive behavior column. Then after a few days, we should be able to see what's really going on.
Okay. But it's easy to see when he's fighting. How are we supposed to know when he's not starting anything or acting out? What, one mark for every second he just sits there or breathes?
That was my question too. The counselor said that for every 10 minutes that goes by and there's no fighting, then we can place a mark in the positive behavior column. But you're still not sure.
No, I just don't see how this is going to change Trevor.
It's not supposed to change it. It's supposed to give us a picture of what's actually going on.
And once we know what's going on,
Then we can change his behavior.
okay.
Hey there, how you guys doing?
Hey, how was that test?
Alright, I guess.
You guessed.
Dang, Jeff was a math, and I should let him take the test for me.
Girl, stop talking that nonsense. Stay out of my ball. Anyway, where's the math man?
He'll be here, he's just behind.
Hey there.
Come on.
I don't think so. There's only room in this kitchen for one cook, and that is me. So go outside and finish dinner.
All right.
Go watch TV or something. Give me a chance to finish what I need to do.
Man, if you don't move.
Yeah, what?
Stop, man.
Trevor, what's going on?
Steven's pushing me.
Stephen, you need to stay on your side of the couch.
Stop, man. That brother better run faster than that.
It's kind of like how we found you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You know, it's funny though.
What?
You struck at the doorstep. Shut up.
That's all right.
You special, it's okay. Special.
You know what kind of special you're talking about. Hey, Alicia, look what's on Fox, will you? If you're not gonna use the remote, then give it to me. Yo, chick, stop! Stop!
You two stop playing around.
Just listen to Mom.
Just listen to Mom.
Quit it.
You big one.
Knock it off.
Stop doing that. Trevor!
He started it with me. Huh?
You a punk.
Enough!
Hey, babe.
How was work?
Well, let me just put it like this. It is good to be home. So how'd everything go here?
Well, it went, but I do feel a little bit better about it.
I see you've been sticking with that tracking stuff.
Yeah, for a couple of days now.
Well,
Well, I've been keeping track for an hour after they all come home from school. And it turns out that Trevor does start a lot of stuff,
of course.
but not as much as we thought.
My, look at how much of the time they didn't faint. It never seems that way to me.
Well, that's why we agreed to try this out. Now we know we should be giving them attention for getting along.
Oh, I'm all for that.
Another thing I realized while I was tracking, even though Trevor acts out, a lot of the time Stephen is provoking him.
Really? I guess it was worth all this paperwork just to find that out. How did we miss that?
Well, we're too close. We hear a noise, we look up, and there'd be Trevor hitting
Right.
or fighting somebody.
Right.
Besides, the school counselor told me that people are wired to pay attention to negative behaviors.
Mhm.
We're just like everyone else. We pay attention to the bad stuff.
Yeah, but we still want to put a limit to the bad stuff.
And we will, but now we know to look at Stephen's behavior too.
I know that's right.
Was that it? Okay. So. Go back to our notes. Did y'all see the behaviors that she was seeing? Okay. Did anybody see anything different from what you think she saw? Did you hear some of the conversations that was going on in the background between the kids? Yeah. So Stephen was constantly provoking. Even when he was joking around, it was an attempt to provoke Trevor, right? What do you feel like might be the next step for these parents?
Like I said, start praising them more for getting along
Right.
with each other.
Right.
Trying to nurture that. Maybe it doesn't seem like, it seems like the mom is doing like a million different things and distracted, and so maybe her spending some time with the kids, you know,
Right.
might help.
Yeah.
I think the biggest step is bringing it to the father's attention too. And the fact of getting him on board was a big step too. Because first he was just like ready to lay the smack down. Like,
On poor Trevor, right? Yeah.
And he really thought it was just Trevor's
Yeah.
fault. He didn't see the other kids because of what mom was probably reporting to him. He didn't see the other kids as being a problem.
And it seemed like that older kid was a little more savvy in his, you know, how he was, you know.
Getting around.
Right,
with his
yeah.
provoking.
Right. And Trevor, he, you know, was the kid that lashes out and speaks up and that kind of stuff. And like she said, you know, we're all wired to see the negative. The squeaky wheel gets the oil, you know, mentality. Okay. Did anybody see anything different? Did you see anything different, Zelda, or?
I actually thought that Stephen was Trevor at first. 'Cause when they first walked in the door, he was like poking on the girl. I was like, okay, here he is. And then it wasn't him, and I was like, didn't mark a thing down. So I got confused at first.
Oh, okay. That's good. So you recognized Stephen's stuff right at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I thought he was Trevor.
Okay.
The same, as soon as he walked in, he didn't put his book bag, just
Yeah,
threw
he
it
threw it
down.
down.
Threw the coat down, yeah, I
And he,
noticed
like,
that
poked
too.
at her or whatever he did.
Right.
Like, pinched her or whatever. And she's like, stop. Or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was immediately picking on both of them, right? Okay. All right, so that was our tracking, and now we're going to take it to the next step.
Which means we're getting closer to being done.
Yeah.
So with these sessions, we're going to ask that you guys do some stuff at home. It's not necessarily required, but I think it would really be helpful for you guys. And we're going to have your home practice this time be tracking a behavior. So you'll notice on page 9 and 10 of your foster parent manual, we're going to ask that you pick a behavior you want to work on, a problem behavior. And track it between now and the next time that we meet, which hopefully will be next week. But we'll definitely get that scheduled. And you both have placements, so I would try to do it with your foster child, track a negative behavior. If you're not really seeing a lot of negative behaviors, you could track somebody else's behavior. You could track a spouse's or a biological child, but since you guys do have placement, it'll probably be easier for you guys to do that. So you're just gonna complete that. You're gonna pick a little bit of time each day and track that behavior, I think for like 3 days, try to do that. And then just come back with what you see.
And you might be surprised, you know, it might be something you're like, yep, it's exactly what I thought. And then it might be, ooh, I didn't even see that, you know, kind of stuff. So it might be helpful.
There's something that she does that really bothers me.
Okay. Tell me what that is.
And I try not to let it bother me, but it really bothers me. And she knows. But when she wants something, she calls me mom. But when she's in trouble, she calls me Zelda. And it really makes me angry. Like, I try not to like show it, and I just go, okay, you know. But then I just walk away like.
So you've probably already identified that's her manipulative way of getting something. You know, she thinks if she calls you mom that you're going to be more giving. Yeah.
Cause like she told me that they were gonna be at the school because they were coming back from volleyball. And she's like, oh, we're almost at the school, so I went and I sat there and they're like, oh, we stopped for dinner. So I had to sit at the school for over an hour to wait for them to get there. And she's like, I'm sorry, Zelda. And then like the next day she's like, can I do such and such with a friend, please, Mom? And I'm like, like it takes everything in me. I'm just like, oh, it's just so manipulative. Like it makes me so angry.
And have you said something to her?
I did last night,
Okay.
but yeah.
And what was her response?
She's just, well, I'm sorry.
And do you think she did it intentionally, or do you think that it was something she was not even realizing she was doing?
She does it intentionally.
It
It
wasn't
happened more than
intentional.
one time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know she does it intentionally. That's why I brought it up to her. At the first time it happened, I was like, oh, okay.
Give it the
And
benefit
then the
of the
second time I was like, And then the third time I was like, that's it.
So you've kind of been doing some informal tracking on your own,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Good.
And I'm like, it's fine if you don't want to call me Mom, but don't, like, choose one or the other. Don't use it to, like, get something out of me because you think I like you calling me Mom, so that's going to get you something. Like, it just
And likewise, maybe understand that just because you might think you're in trouble doesn't mean that
you
I
have to
wouldn't
call-
want you to
Right.
call me Mom.
Right.
You know, that it's.
I don't love you less because you're in
Yeah.
trouble. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you're at the mercy of the school buses, so it's not even necessarily.
It's her coach that drives it.
It
So.
it is. I go through the same thing, so I can sympathize with you completely, so.
They're on an away game tomorrow, and I'm not going to miss it again because I'm not sitting at that school. But anyhow, I just had to share that. 'Cause
Oh, yeah.
it's really recent.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And that's, yeah.
Other than that,
Do y'all have an idea about
I can't
something?
think of anything.
You can't think of anything right now? Okay.
I don't really
There's a lot
have
of problems.
Yeah.
Neighbor.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe with this, because this is kind of the first time that you're gonna track it, maybe don't necessarily start out with a major behavior. Just start out with something that you see frequently, but you think you might be able to figure it out or can track it a little bit better. So if it's something that is persistent and you know that you'll be able to observe it a little bit better.
I
And-
feel like
and-
we're working on stuff all the time, so it's not like I can think of one just to do, you know, because we know,
Right.
by this time we know kind of what the antecedent and everything is already.
Right.
Like, we're working on it, so I'm trying to, I guess we will have to just talk and figure out.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too that, you know, and this is just an observation, you know, Courtney's like, I really don't know anything. And then, you know, Megan was like, well, there's tons of stuff. you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, just, you know, it's how you know, kind of observe things
Yeah.
too, you know.
Yeah.
So,
It's like she said, we're working on everything, so it's kind of like I can't pinpoint one thing.
one
we
thing,
haven't
yeah,
started
already
on.
addressed.
I mean, I guess the smallest thing I can think of that irritates me is doesn't put her shoes in her room when she gets done. It's like kicks them off.
But
the
that's
table.
ADHD.
But yeah, that's why I can't be like, okay.
That's not
Did you
something-
notice I use that for my example too?
Yeah.
My kids do that. It's an
Yeah.
it is.
That doesn't drive me nuts because I'm
I can't
ADHD
think of
too,
one either for
so.
Savannah.
Yeah. I just
Well-
trip over.
That's okay. You corrected yourself.
Well, just try, you know, and give it a whirl. And if you see something, maybe they'll surprise you and they'll come up with something new, you know, that you can try to figure out. We'll wish that one on
It
you.
just sounds like, it really does sound like you guys really stay on top of some of this stuff and
Yeah.
are very vigilant of behaviors to
Right.
begin with. So it might be that you have to observe somebody else's behavior as
Maybe,
well.
maybe somebody else in your household.
Because maybe you're focusing a little more on the foster child and not
I
more
just
on.
started thinking about Grady.
I was like, you know what's really funny?
Look, because Zelda said her dad. So.
That was really funny that you guys said that
Yeah,
because I was like, you don't have to
nervous.
pick each other, you could pick Granny or your, how's she doing?
She's doing great.
Good.
Yeah, she's doing much better. She's done a like full recovery, I feel like.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry for this.
All right, guys. So let's wrap it up. Yay! So let's turn to 321 and review your manuals.
Page 11.
Page 11. Okay, let's think about, I'm going to ask you about 3 questions here, and I want y'all to give me some thoughts about what you're thinking. What are 3 ways that you can build meaningful relationships with youth in your care?
Being patient.
Being patient.
Supportive of either their, not only their bad decisions, but their good.
Right. Being supportive. Awesome. And another one?
I was setting that positive foundation for them to grow off of, like their positive behaviors and actions. Just build off that, they grow, their self-esteem to go up.
Right. Really focusing maybe a lot more attention, trying to catch them doing the good things. Yeah, exactly.
I think it's just important to find at least one thing to bond on. Just like that one thing that you either have in common or one thing that you can come together on and grow from together.
Yes, that's good.
Like for us, it's music.
Yeah. What do the A and the C stand for in the pattern of ABC behaviors? Or ABC, I gave the B away. And
Consequence.
very good, okay. Why is it helpful to observe the A and the C in addition to the behaviors?
Because
Helps you
observing
understand.
the A, you can try to find ways to intervene to stop those behaviors, and then the consequences, you can try to give a positive spin or just see if the consequence is working or if it's really not, like should you come at it a different way.
Kind of ties the whole picture together so you have a full understanding of the situation, so you can either spin it to make it positive or attack the situation in a way to make it change.
Right, perfect, okay. And lastly, what is one behavior you're going to track at home? And I know we've just talked about that and y'all are like, we're not sure yet, but remember, if it is something with your therapeutic kid, just, use it as an opportunity to try to drill down on maybe some things that you all are already working on, but maybe it just needs a little tweaking,
I think one thing maybe might be good is a negative is kind of getting to bed, We have to deal with replacement coming out and saying, I've been trying to counteract this because she'll come out and she'll say, I need water, I need my fan on, I need this, I need that, so I'm just
like trying to delay going to bed.
Yeah, while we're in the kitchen like cleaning up and making lunch or whatever, she's coming in, and I'm like, lay down.
So you probably already started nipping that one in the butt by
I put
having
on
the water,
Good. I put on the fan.
Okay, that's good.
That
think-
might be.
Tracking her little lies, that I keep catching her in little lies,
We keep
things
on
that she
little
doesn't need
lies,
to lie
too.
about. That I catch her in and then she's like, well, I just didn't think that you'd like that. And I'm like, I don't like that you're lying. That's what I can handle the truth. I can't handle you lying.
Okay.
So.
And just remember, and that, so, and lying, I mean, that might be hard to actually
Right.
see until you've realized it, you know what I'm saying? I mean, that's gonna be one that might take
That took us
a
while.
few days to even realize that there was a lie, depending on the
She's not
situation.
very good at it. I'm like, I
Yes.
see you.
Yeah. So trying to figure out why that's going on, that's a big one. Okay. Any questions? Anybody have anything that sparked the interest? I know we didn't add anything to the parking lot, but did y'all have anything that was kind of sitting there unresolved that you want to talk about? Anything that, everybody good? Okay. All right. Well, this will conclude session 1.
Yeah. Thank
The
you
other
guys
face in
for
the challenge.
coming.
Yeah.
Definitely, especially a little short notice. So.
Yeah, appreciate it. Good job, guys.